The moans weren't just loud, they were filthy, raw, breathless, unforgivable. The kind of sounds that used to be just for me. Now another man was pulling them from her lips. I wasn't supposed to be home. Samantha thought I was still thousands of miles away, still in a war zone, still in uniform, still too far away to ever know what she was doing behind my back. She was wrong. I moved like a shadow, my body coiled tight, every muscle wound like a tripwire. My hands curled into fists as I heard it again, her gasp, the creak of our bed, the deep, husky groan of a man who didn't belong in my house. Someone was inside my wife, and it wasn't me. My heart slammed against my ribs, but it wasn't pain, it was rage. I could have stormed inside. I could have ripped the door open, dragged him out of my bed, and put a bullet between his eyes. But I was a soldier, a tactician, a hunter. So I waited, watched, listened, and that's when I heard something else. A murmur, a whisper, low, teasing words, spoken in a thick foreign accent. Not just any accent, Russian. My blood turned to ice. This wasn't just some random man screwing my wife. This was an enemy. I pushed the door open, and there they were. Samantha, my wife, naked, writhing, holding on to him like he was the only man in the world. Her fingers were tangled in his dark hair, nails dragging down his back, her lips parted in a pleasure-drunk haze. And him? He was no ordinary man, tall, scarred, lean muscles stretched over a body trained for war. A soldier, but not one of ours. His back was turned to me, but I saw it. The tattoo, a black serpent wrapped around a dagger, FSB, Russian intelligence, a spy. And my wife was moaning for him like she had no idea she was committing treason with her own body. My vision narrowed. 1,000 instincts screamed inside my head. Kill, kill, kill. I had spent years fighting men like him in the shadows, eliminating threats before they ever reached American soil. And now, one of them was in my home, in my bed, with my wife. I should have seen red, should have snapped his neck right then and there. Instead, I stood there, watching, calculating, because this wasn't just adultery. This was war. My name is Vincent Vaughn. I'm 36 years old. Special Forces. I have spent the last 10 years hunting down the world's most dangerous men. I kill ghosts. I erase threats before they ever make headlines. I have seen the worst of humanity, but nothing prepared me for the moment I saw my own wife sprawled beneath an enemy. Samantha's head snapped toward me, her scream catching in her throat. Her entire body went rigid, not guilty, not embarrassed, terrified. And that's when I knew she hadn't just betrayed me. She had betrayed our country. The Russian? He didn't even flinch. In fact, he smirked, like he knew something I didn't, like he had been waiting for this moment. He turned his head, slow and deliberate, like a predator acknowledging a challenge. Dark eyes, sharp jaw, the face of a man who knew he had already won. And then he spoke, in Russian. "Surprised, soldier?" The world tilted, my stomach twisted, not from heartbreak, from something much worse. Realization. This wasn't just an affair, this was an operation. And I was the target. The Russian smiled like he owned the room, like he owned my wife, like he had already won. I've killed men for less. My muscles tensed, instincts screaming for me to end him now, but something made me stop, something worse than the sight of my wife's betrayal. Samantha wasn't just guilty, she was scared. Her breath hitched, her knuckles white as she gripped the sheets against her chest. She wasn't just afraid of getting caught. She was afraid of what was going to happen next. I narrowed my eyes. She knew something. The Russian moved slowly, stretching like a man who had all the time in the world. Still naked, still smirking. I wanted to wipe that smirk off his face, permanently. He tilted his head, watching me like he was studying a wild animal. "You are home early, Captain Vaughn?" My spine stiffened. He knew my name. He knew who I was. I was trained to kill men like him. But how long had he been watching me? How long had he been in my home? I clenched my jaw. "You've got 5 seconds to give me one reason not to put a bullet in your head." He chuckled, unbothered. "That would be a shame. You'd never hear why your wife let me into your bed." Samantha flinched. That tiny reaction told me everything. She hadn't just been seduced. She had been compromised. I didn't take my eyes off her. "Samantha, talk, now." She swallowed hard. "Vincent, I didn't have a choice." Bullshit. I took a step closer, my body blocking the doorway. No escape. The walls of the bedroom seemed to close in, the air thick with tension. She was still clutching the sheets like they could protect her, but nothing could protect her from what was coming next. I needed to stay in control, stay calm. But calm wasn't an option when my wife was still naked and trembling in the same bed where she had just betrayed me. The Russian stood slowly, his toned, scarred body stretching like a panther. He reached for his pants, unfazed, like we weren't seconds from tearing each other apart. "She's telling the truth," he mused, buttoning his pants with infuriating slowness. "She had no choice." I clenched my fists. "Explain." He smirked again, eyes glinting with amusement. He was enjoying this. "Because," he said, fastening his belt, "if she didn't obey, we would have killed you." Everything stopped. Everything. My blood turned to ice. Samantha choked on a breath, looking at me like she was silently begging for forgiveness. But forgiveness wasn't on the table. I turned back to the Russian. "You came here to kill me?" His smirk never wavered. "No, not yet. That comes later." Later. The word coiled around my brain like a snake. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning. Samantha whispered, "Vincent, I was protecting you. I ignored her. My mind was already moving too fast, piecing together the puzzle. This spy, this Russian bastard, wasn't just sleeping with my wife to humiliate me. He had been sent here for something bigger, and Samantha had let him in. For how long? How much had she told him? My jaw tightened. "Tell me the whole thing, now." The Russian raised an eyebrow, impressed. "Sharp. I can see why they wanted you dead." Wanted? Not past tense. Present. Meaning someone still did. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to think like a soldier. Emotions were a liability. I couldn't let rage take over. Not yet. I turned my gaze back to my wife, the woman I had trusted with my life. She was still shaking, tears pooling in her eyes. "Vincent, please. They threatened me." I didn't blink. "How long?" A beat of silence. Then the truth slipped from her lips like a death sentence. 6 months. Everything inside me went cold. 6 months. While I was overseas, she had been in bed with the enemy. Not just once. For half a year. She had been feeding him information, giving him access to my home, my life, my work. And now, they weren't just here to ruin my marriage. They were here to kill me. The Russian clapped his hands together as if this was all just a game to him. "I have to say," he mused. Your wife was very accommodating. I moved. Fast. Too fast for him to react. My fist collided with his jaw so hard he stumbled back against the dresser, knocking over a lamp. Samantha screamed. The Russian groaned, rolling his jaw before looking up at me, grinning. You hit like a man who's still thinking rationally, he said, blood trickling from his lip. He was right, because I was thinking rationally. I had 100 ways to kill him right now, but that wasn't the mission anymore. Killing him was too easy. I needed to know who sent him. And Samantha? She needed to learn what betrayal really felt like. I stepped back, shaking the pain out of my knuckles. You tell whoever sent you that they just made the biggest mistake of their lives. The Russian wiped the blood from his lip, smirking. Oh, Vincent, this isn't just about you. His next words sent ice through my veins. This is about what you stole from us. What I stole? What the hell was he talking about? Samantha sobbed. Vincent, please, just let him go. I held up a hand, silencing her. He's not going anywhere. The Russian grinned. You think you have control here? I exhaled slowly, rolling my shoulders. Then I smiled back, because I had already decided how this was going to end. I don't think I have control, I said calmly. I know I do. The Russian was still smiling through the blood. Wrong move. I was done playing his game. It was time for him to play mine. I stepped forward, slow and deliberate, my body blocking every possible exit. The air thickened, the kind of tension that only happens before a man gets broken. His smirk never faded. You're going to answer my questions, I said, my voice low, controlled, dangerous. He tilted his head, amusement flickering in his eyes. And if I don't? I smiled. He had no idea what kind of man he was dealing with. Before he could react, I grabbed him by the throat and slammed him into the wall. The impact shook the entire room. A picture frame crashed to the floor. Samantha screamed, but I wasn't listening to her anymore. The Russian choked, clawing at my grip, but I pressed harder, my forearm crushing his windpipe. His eyes darkened. For the first time, his smirk disappeared. I leaned in, my voice a growl. Who sent you? He coughed, trying to speak, but I wasn't feeling patient. I tightened my grip. He tried to kill me. He slept with my wife. Now I was going to break him. Samantha sobbed, Vincent, stop! You're going to kill him! Not yet. The Russian gasped for air, his fingers twitching toward his waistband. A knife. I smirked. Predictable. The second he made his move, I spun him around and drove his own blade into his shoulder. He let out a snarl of pain, knees buckling, blood spilling onto the sheets where he had just been tangled up with my wife. I twisted the handle, leaning down so only he could hear me. I can keep you alive just long enough to regret everything you've ever done. He let out a strained laugh. You don't want me dead. I ripped the knife out. He groaned, sagging against the wall, his breaths sharp and uneven. But he was still smirking. Why? He was bleeding, weak. He should have been afraid. But he wasn't. Something wasn't right. Then I saw it. A tiny red light flickering on his belt. A tracker. Shit. Someone was coming for him, and that meant they were coming for me. I grabbed him by the collar. Who else is here? He chuckled, spitting blood onto the floor. You have no idea what you've stepped into, soldier. Samantha screamed as the first gunshot shattered the window. We weren't alone anymore. The kill squad. They moved fast, tactical, coordinated. Trained assassins. I shoved Samantha to the ground as another bullet whizzed past her head. She shrieked, covering her ears. "Vincent! What's happening?" Like she didn't already know. This was her mess. But now it was mine. I pulled my Glock from my holster and took cover behind the dresser. Another shot exploded through the mirror, glass raining down like 1,000 tiny knives. The Russian laughed. Even bleeding, he was still laughing. "This was the plan, wasn't it?" I said coldly. "Distract me long enough for your people to get here?" He wiped blood from his mouth. "And you walked right into it." Another gunshot. Closer. They were inside the house. I exhaled slowly. The situation was bad. 2 options, fight or run. I glanced at Samantha, who was still crying, still shaking. She had made her choice 6 months ago. But I hadn't made mine yet. I grabbed the Russian by the back of his neck and yanked him toward me. His groan of pain was satisfying. "You're coming with me," I muttered. His smirk returned. "Afraid to lose me, Captain?" "No, just afraid to let you die too quickly." I kicked the door open and took the first shot. The first bullet missed my head by an inch. The second wasn't so lucky. I felt the heat graze past my shoulder, burning through the fabric of my shirt. But I didn't stop moving. I couldn't, because if I stopped for even a second, I was dead. The Russian was bleeding, but still smirking, dragging himself behind me like a trophy I refused to let go of. Samantha was screaming, her bare body still wrapped in our silk sheets, shaking like a cornered traitor. I had 2 priorities now. Kill the men who just stormed into my house. Find out why the hell I was on their hit list. And I was going to do both before sunrise. Another bullet tore through the hallway as I kicked open the back door, dragging the Russian with me. 2 masked men were already there. Fully armed, fully trained, fully prepared to take me out. But they weren't prepared for me. I didn't hesitate. I pulled the Russian in front of me like a human shield, his own men freezing when they saw their asset bleeding in my arms. That second of hesitation was all I needed. I fired 2 shots. The first one took out the guy on the right. The second landed between the eyes of the one on the left. Their bodies dropped before they could even scream. Just like that, the kill squad was already down 2 men. The Russian groaned in my grip, blood dripping down his chest. He coughed. "You're going to regret this, Captain Vaughn." I pressed the barrel of my gun to his ribs. "I already regret letting you breathe this long." Samantha ran out behind me, still sobbing. "Vincent, please, we have to go. They're going to kill us both." I should have left her there. I should have let her face the monsters she let in. But the soldier in me? The man who once loved her? He still wasn't ready to watch her die. I grabbed her wrist and dragged her with me. The safe house. I drove fast, too fast, tires screeching as I wove through the dark, my hands white-knuckled around the wheel. Samantha sat in the passenger seat, still wrapped in nothing but the silk sheets. Her eyes were red, swollen. But I didn't care. The Russian was in the back, still bleeding, still smiling. "Tell me," I muttered, eyes locked on the road, "who put a target on my back?" Silence. I reached back, grabbing his jaw, forcing him to look at me. "Tell me." His dark eyes gleamed with amusement. "You stole something from my people, something worth killing for." I gritted my teeth. "I've stolen a lot of things from a lot of bad men. Be specific." He exhaled slowly, pain flickering across his face for the first time. Then he chuckled. "Your wife should tell you." I turned my head sharply. Samantha flinched, and that's when I knew she was still hiding something. I slammed on the brakes. The car screeched to a halt on the empty dirt road. I turned in my seat, grabbing her face, forcing her to look at me. "What did you do, Samantha?" She burst into tears. "Vincent, I swear, I didn't mean for this to happen." "What did you do?" she sobbed, hands shaking. I gave them access to your files." The world tilted, my stomach twisted, my pulse hammering against my skull. "What files?" My voice was dangerously low. She sniffled. "The mission logs. Your last assignment." I closed my eyes. Fuck. My last mission. Classified. Top secret. The kind of mission that could start a war if it got into the wrong hands. And now, thanks to Samantha and the Russian bastard in my back seat, it was in the wrong hands. The final move. I pulled into the safe house, yanking the Russian out of the car and throwing him onto the floor. He groaned, rolling onto his back, grinning up at me like he was enjoying every second of this. I stood over him, pressing the gun to his temple. "One last chance. Who sent you?" His smirk grew. "The people who will finish what you started." That was it. I pulled the trigger. Click. Empty. He knew. He knew I wasn't going to kill him yet. Samantha gasped. She still didn't understand. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about survival. I leaned down, gripping his jaw, my voice a whisper of death. "I'm going to find your men. I'm going to take back what you stole. And then I'm going to bury you so deep that Russia will think you were never born." He laughed softly, blood dripping down his chin. "You think this ends with me?" I pressed the gun harder against his skin. "It ends however I decide." He smiled, and then he bit down. His body jerked violently. My eyes widened. Cyanide. That son of a Bach just killed himself. Samantha screamed, backing away. But I was already moving, searching his pockets, his belt, anything that might tell me who he was working for. And then I found it. A phone. The screen flashed. One new message. I clicked it open. "Next time we send someone stronger." The aftermath. The sun was rising. Samantha sat on the bed, shaking, eyes pleading. "Vincent, please, tell me this isn't the end for us." I stared at her for a long time. The woman I once loved. The woman who had sold me out. Then I turned around, grabbed my keys, and walked out the door. I didn't look back. She wasn't my problem anymore.